All right, we're back. Took a little hiatus there for a minute. For a minute. I like when people say that. It's been a minute.
In a minute, I need a sentimental. Just kidding.
That's fun.
That song gets stuck. That song gets stuck in my head really easily if you get me started. So thank you for that.
I don't know why my iPad changes the screen brightness when the automatic is off. Oh well. Okay, let's jump into this. See where we're at. I think right here we ended up on this paragraph here where it's talking about. It seems like it's really simple information, but he builds up. That's what I love about Trollword. He starts at the very basic, like you don't understand the basics, and then he gets deeper and deeper, like going from the shallow end of the pool to the deep end, and he just keeps doing that. And so, in this part, he's talking about how we come to build a paradigm around the physical world around us with our five senses, the bumps and the bruises that we get as a child trying to learn how to walk and then ride a bike, and just getting familiar with matter. I like Bill Proctor, Bob Proctor, and how he says we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, and there's a huge difference. Is my understanding based on the things that I've learned and read, and that there's a huge difference between being a spiritual being without this flesh and bones and versus being a spiritual entity. They've meshed together. I remember when I was a child, they kind of explained it like, here's your spirit, and then they'd have a glove, like a gardening glove, and they would put it on the hand, and that represented the physical body. And the physical body was something that wouldn't last forever, but the spirit always lasts. And so the physical body being put meshed together with the spiritual um, is a totally different experience, and it helps us to really experience opposition, hot, cold, sick, healthy, happy, sad, in a much more, I guess you could say, fulfilling way. And um, I don't know what, like, I don't, etherical would probably be the exact opposite, in a more concrete way or just a more physical way. And it adds more to the sensations that we experience as a personal being. And so that's, just a basic kind of understanding that I've always grown up with. And so we don't know. I mean, we feel like we know everything about her because that's what we were brought up in. And I think what gets lagged behind is that we were spiritual beings, and they're so meshed together that they seem like one, but they're not right now, because we will die and the glove will come off. At a later time, that will, through the resurrection, come back and be united forever in its perfect form. But there's just this learning process that we need to learn about that whole thing, and the real power. Well, I was going to say the real power comes from the spirit, but there's also a power that comes from the physical as well. But the divine mental faculties that we inherit is a part of the spirit and forever will be. So, and it's kind of like being in a sandbox and learning all over again how to play and how to, experience it. But we kind of feel like, again, being raised that way, that we know everything there is to know about it, but we are literally in preschool trying to figure this out and trying to graduate. Any thoughts you
I
have
kind
on
of see
to
the
share?
I kind of see the body as a harness, I guess. I mean, if you think of when somebody holds a magnifying glass and there's all the sun's rays, and the sun, is keeping us warm and it's lighting the sky, and we think that maybe that's the sun's only purpose if we're just, if that's all we know. But if you hold a magnifying glass and you channel the sun's rays through that little physical thing, it can actually like make a laser type beam and start a fire. So it's like channeling all of this ethericalness into something that that can then be tamed or harnessed, like Pecos Bill and the tornado, things like that. So um, I heard someone explain explain this in a way that I thought was a really cool way, but it's like having a concept. I used to say I like to take abstract to concrete because abstract, you can't really do anything about it. There's a lot of abstractness in the world, talking about energies and things like that. And I totally believe in energy, obviously, but sometimes all the talk about it seems like it's enough, but what do we do with it? And so he was explaining it as concept, like an idea or a thought, or the etherical part of understanding is one thing. But in order to use that, we have to turn the concept into a skill so that we can actually put the concept into use and application in our life. So that's like what this podcast is about, that practical application. And I see the body as God's way of helping us know how to take all of this infinite vastness of all of this power and all of this understanding and practice putting it to use through this magnifying glass, I guess, to turn it into something tangible that we can work with. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally like some of the things that come to mind. And it's not all or none, but like in a religious setting or even reading the Bible, it's really hard to take that abstractness and those principles and how do I apply that? It's there, but there's like parts of it that seem like they're not missing, but maybe not brought to fruition in that practical application. Like I grew up in a religious setting, but I didn't understand how to incrementally increase my faith through the controlling of my mental faculties. So, like you're saying, that skill set of learning how to think in a way that is literally incremental, or it's more concrete. It there was a word that I used the other day. What was it? Like measurable. There's another word for measurable, but quantifiable. Like you can quantify it, yeah. And that's what the podcast is all about because that's what we learned to, how to start doing in a way that made the biggest difference in the results in our lives. And I think he goes on to say it here somewhere, maybe in the next chapter, about mind over matter. And that's what we're getting to. But right here, he's just talking about the gross matter that, the earth, the ground, the trees, the desk that we're sitting in. So there's more to it than meets the eye. Now we shall. So I'm just going to go right here. I don't remember where we left off, but I think this is important. This fluid plastic state. So why does matter exist? The answer is that if the form were not expressed in solid substance, things would perpetually be flowing into each other, so that no identity could be maintained for a single moment. To this, it might be replied that a condition of matter is conceivable in which, though in itself a plastic substance in a fluent state, it might yet, by the operation of will, be held in any particular forms desired. So he's talking about the ether, like the air that we can run our hands through. And on the smallest level, there's particles in it, but we can't see it, and it's not stopping our hand from moving. It's not solid matter. And that's more of like that energy you were talking about. We're surrounded by it. And he's saying that can coalesce into something that would become solid, like this little bottle that I have right here. He says it's not absurd to think that state could coalesce into something that is identifiable. It might yet, by the operation of will, be held in any particular form desired. The idea of such a condition of matter is no doubt conceivable. And when the fluent matter was thus held in particular forms, you would have concrete matter just as we now know it, just as we know it now. Only with this difference, that it would return to its fluid state as soon as the supporting will was withdrawn. So whatever it is, the mind and the will of the mind over matter, when it holds it together, if you could somehow put it like a cage over it or some kind of cup that would not allow that influence to radiate out, then all of the things outside of that would go back into the etheric and basically collapse back into the etheric because it didn't have the mind that brought it together no longer influencing it. And so when you look at, like, when I hear that and I think of God and knowing that God created the solar system and that he's upholding it, like, my finite mind can't understand that, but the finite can't comprehend the omnipotent. It's impossible. And so to think of the greatness of God to be able to uphold the world around us as we see it in nature, the universal, is just awe-inspiring, and something that I look forward to knowing more about, at some here in the future and throughout the eternities, being able to understand that. But that is like, what I love about Trollward is he reverse engineers things, and you'll see that even as we go into the next chapter, you're going to have some ahas on this stuff here. And so, kind of in setting you up for that, that the world around us is being upheld by the Supreme, and he's going to be able to reverse engineer that and prove it scientifically, where some things in science that are not true, but they try to portray them as being true, they can't do that. They get to a point where it's unexplainable. But I love how Trollward unwinds all of that. And again, we'll see that into the next chapter and throughout. But again, the Supreme is upholding everything that we see in nature and in our created world, which is just, again, like, I could only focus on one or two or a few things at one time. Could you imagine being able to uphold all things? It's pretty amazing.
That's
Any
cool.
thoughts?
It's true. I love that, how you just described, I guess, excuse me, understanding or knowing, finding if something is true is by having it just out there and stated. Like, it's really hard to know if it's true because there's so many statements and opinions and
Yeah.
things. But by being able to reverse engineer and find that the truth exists all the way to the purity of the truth is really powerful, because we have truth that comes from the source, like it comes from God, right? It's in its pure form, it's whole and complete. But then on earth, just like all this, the ethericalness, I guess, I always picture it as there was this great big ball of truth that got broken into bajillion pieces, and we're all about gathering truth and putting it back into pieces. That's how I look at it. There's no written anything. It's just how I see it in my mind. But honestly, like, we had truth in our spiritual sense, but then we come to earth where, there's a veil or something put between the spiritual understanding and our humanness. So the very first filter of truth that kind of breaks it down is the fact that we are human, and we all have our own, like, biological and genetic makeup that makes us us. So that can be defined in part as temperament. So that becomes the first filter of truth. And the way that we perceive truth is filtered through our humanness and who we are on a genetic and unchangeable level. And then we have the next layer of filter. If I had this on a drawing, it'd probably be easier, but the next layer of filter is our experiences. So our upbringing, our attachment style, and the core beliefs that we form, because we have billions of cells that have this genetic code, and they start to wire in individual and unique ways based on how we filter that truth through our attachment style. But then we have experiences with other people and other, environmental influences like culture and government and school and religion. And then we have our interpretation of truth based on those filters. And then we have the expression of truth, which is, so many times removed from the actual truth. So being able to reverse engineer that and remove filters as we go along, and realize that, just because it looks like the earth is flat doesn't mean that it is. It's just the way that I perceived it. It's the way I've been taught. It's, all of that. I haven't ever actually taken and explored it, but when I go and I see that I can go all the way back around. So being able to do that. And one of the greatest ways in my PhD program, the very first course that I took, they had us read an article about the best way to discover truth is to openly look at things that are in opposition of what we believe, so that it can help take out some of those filters and compound what we know, and either prove it or expand it through looking at all all the possibilities instead of just believing our own filter, because what we see and what we think we know, what is it? It's not what we know, but what we don't know that ain't so.
Hmm.
Is that quote? Like what we think we know is not the complete truth. So we've got to be willing to look and explore and discover and reverse engineer to find it.
Yeah,
So
it's
that was
I
my
like,
thing.
a couple points that along with what you just said, the opposition, like when I started on the journey, I had to look at the parts that what's not right about me. What is causing these negative results? And I had to reverse engineer those to certain beliefs that I had that weren't actually true. They were erroneous. And I was like, my perspective was off. And so it produced negative results. That's the only time we get negative results is when we break a principle. And so I had to look at the opposition, like you were saying, the other side of what I wanted to be. And that really helps us to see clearly in that reverse engineering process. And it's not that truth isn't discoverable. It absolutely is. Even the very subtle and mysterious things are absolutely discoverable. It's just that, quite frankly, most people won't read. They won't take the time to hunger and thirst after finding out about something that takes time and energy and effort and focus without any kind of like it's kind of like a delayed satisfaction. And most people, when I say most, it's probably like this psychologist says in Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret, 98% of, or what is it? Yeah, I think 97%, 95% would rather do anything than think, and then 3% think they think, and 2% actually really think. And anybody could be in that 2%. It's not like a judgment thing. It's just a matter of placing your priorities and what you focus on. And what he's saying here is a lot of people don't focus on the things that have to do with I guess it would probably fall under a category of philosophy, really trying to figure out and improve your own philosophy and grow it and expand it by discovering more truths. And you have to search because they're not like in school we learn, see Jane run, see Dick and Jane run. It's not spelled out for us like that in school. And so you have to take it upon your own initiative to go out and look and find and glean the different places to where these answers are. We said it in our workbook. A mentor who passed away a long time ago, mentor by reading his words, said that you must come to find out about God. Like that should be your priority, is to understand the characteristics of God. And so we put in the workbook, the more we understand about ourselves, the more we understand who God is, the more we understand about our true selves and all of the magnificence that we are. And then you could reverse that. So the more we understand who we are, the more we understand who God is, the more we understand who God is, the more we understand who we are. And so that's found out through reading. Like there are words that you can see the connection in that chain of going forward and reverse engineering it. And so when people say, well, how can you know there's a God? Well, by studying and finding these things that give you the proofs that in a chain of effect or events or a domino effect, you can make common sense. It's very commonsensical once you get the pieces. If there's a domino missing, all you got to do is find that domino, put it in there, and then it causes a chain reaction or whatever, or the chain of events to understand this thing more fully. And you see how they connect. But that takes time and thought and effort. But those dominoes that are missing, you can find them. They're available to us. It's just a matter of really wanting to find them. And
Yeah.
I feel like the student that really is searching, they always find what they're looking for after a certain amount of time and effort. And so you can come to know
Yeah.
for a fact in your head without any like, well, I'll just have to not know that piece and just take it on not knowing, but I believe it. No, you can know as a fact once you find those dominoes that lead to the next one. So, anyways, I get a little bit passionate about that, but that's
You can, and reading alone doesn't do it. I mean,
no, it's the
reading,
pondering and all of that that goes with it.
the thought, the pondering, and then the acting upon the word. And so that's what you were saying, just to state it in another way. It doesn't like there's uh, I'm I'm a good student, I guess. And even all through school, there would be people that would study and study and study for a test and they'd memorize words and they, you know, and wouldn't do well in the class. Um, and then, but for some reason, I didn't want to just memorize stuff. I actually wanted to understand it. And so consequently, I never had long study sessions and binging and like memorizing things. I put in my effort every day to internalize things that I was learning and then to write it down and to tear it apart and to understand it from the inside out and then to put it into some kind of practical application so that I really understood it. And so when it came down to the night before the exam, it's not a lot of crash studying. It's just I already knew it and I always did really well in class. And that is a kind of a, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn, but it's just, I think a really
Parallel.
good
Yeah.
parallel of what you're saying, because, a lot of people have, test anxiety in life, not just in, the school setting, because we think we know a lot of things, but then how do we put it to work? I hear a lot of people, even that listen to the podcast that are like, I listen all the time and I study and it's just not working. What's wrong with me? It's not that anything's wrong with you as a person. It isn't that the laws pick and choose who gets to use them. It takes not just head knowledge, but heart knowledge and really assimilating it into being it. And as you do that, you can know something and know for certain that it's true. And what ends up happening all of the time, I would say, because we're human and God is God, there's more to the truth than what we know. What we know is there, but there's a lot more to it. And so it just puts you on this path of continuous discovery and refining what we think we know and turning it from coal, which is really useful, but into that diamond.
Yeah.
Anyway.
A couple of things along those lines. I want to jump back into the book. Because the people that were in the language class, like you were, they had all the information to be able to disseminate it and understand it just like you did, but they chose not to make it a priority the way that you made it a priority to internalize it. And some probably did, but some didn't. Um,
That's not a
and
judgment of
then
them.
no, it's just a fact, right? So when people don't take the time to really internalize something or find the information, then they develop an opinion about it. Though everybody's got an opinion, and a lot of people have uneducated opinions, but they give those opinions as though they were fact, and that's just human nature. And so being able to understand that and not let people with the uneducated opinions influence us, because they're going to influence you in an incomplete, probably erroneous way, and lead you down a wrong path. And also, you
Maybe.
don't have to know all of the dominoes to exercise faith in things that we do know to be true on the level we know them to be true. We can still behave in accordance with those truths that we have, even though they're incomplete. But it's so empowering and so uplifting and so like personally progressive to strive to find those dominoes in the areas that you find most desirable and the things that you feel will move you along in your life. So, yeah, good
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, this is really like meat and potatoes of life, right?
Yeah. I would just add one more thing to what you said. I think sometimes other people's opinions should influence us, but not to take their opinion as truth or to even sway us from what we've already discovered. But other people's opinions can actually inform us to the fact that there's still something missing in what I know or what I
Mhm.
understand. Until I can, with a surety, like either address what they're saying and prove it as false or fill in the gaps of what's missing between their opinion and my opinion. Because really, people have an opinion based on maybe it's a tiny, tiny particle of truth that has been expanded and it might have been expanded in an incorrect way or in an incorrect decision. But I like to, anyway, I think that not to influence us to sway from what our understanding is, or as a way to confuse us or to hop onto that bandwagon, but to inform our own quest. I think other people's opinions can be really helpful in that.
Yeah, and that's the other side of the coin of my perspective in which I was saying it. Because if I know that 2 plus 2 is 4, and somebody's trying to tell me that 2 plus 2 is 8, and I know that it's not because I've learned that piece already, like I've known and I've come to understand with a complete knowledge. That's what my perspective was, is people with opinions where we know it's wrong, right? And then here you're saying there might be something to learn from somebody who maybe has some pieces of truth. So the way that I was explaining that, because there is two sides to that coin. There are some people that totally have it wrong, and you know they have it wrong. And so it's good that you bring up that other piece too as well, because there could be something to learn. I like on the Lord of the Rings where he talks about, where Gandalf talks to Frodo about, what's the little creature guy's name?
Gollum or
Gollum.
Smeagol?
Yeah, Gollum. Yeah, and how he says, because Frodo wanted to react and just snuff him out, and Gandalf kind of holds him back and says, "Don't do that because you don't know what kind of role Gollum has to play in all of this." And so, in a case like that, that's where there's maybe something for us to learn in some of it. But there is absolute facts, and when somebody's wrong and they're just wrong, we need to identify that as well, because we need to take confidence in what our own learning. If we don't have a confidence, then we can't, like, we'll waver when that confidence is needed. So there is a place where we could come to know that we know that we know, because we put in the time, energy, and effort in that thing. So I wouldn't give my opinion to like a geneticist who knows his field, and my ego comes along and I have a conversation and I try to teach him a two or thing about genetics that so
Well,
anyway, there's both sides to that coin, right? And we just gotta, life is about a balancing thing and trying to figure all that out, and still
yeah.
be
And what
open.
I was saying there about the wrong, like somebody can be completely wrong, and their wrongness can inform me where the holes are in my truth, so that it can be undeniably shown to the person who has a completely wrong opinion where their wrongness is all I was saying. Not to change it, but just to inform where the holes are in either the way I explain it or what's missing from what I have.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, so in fluent matter was thus held in particular forms, you would have concrete matter just as we know it now, only with the difference that it would return to its fluid state as the supporting will was withdrawn. Now, as we shall see later on, this is precisely what matter really is, only the will which holds it together in concrete form is not individual but cosmic. So in the cosmic universal influence, which is God, we see that. Like, we see that universally. If I'm driving down the freeway, we both see the mountain over to the left. We might see it a little bit differently, but we both see the mountain. And that's what he's saying by cosmic. And going back to what you said, where people say, this doesn't work for me. This is the reason why, because they don't consistently, if they know how to direct and they got that information, they attended that class and they get how to hold their will on something, but they don't hold it consistently. It's kind of like the supporting will is one. I really like, I've never said that before in relationship to that, but people take the supporting will and it's all over the place because they're so influenced by the outside world, memories, maybe self-consciousness or whatever it might be. And we remove that supporting will. That is the challenge once we understand the principles and we have a goal and we've painted the image of that goal and its specifics. It's our supporting will that will hold up the things being attracted to us, and that's where people falter when they understand the principles of how to use their will and their imagination. That's the challenge right there. What time is it? Probably, let's just go a little bit. I really, because I'm doing this with another group on Monday mornings, and I know what's coming. I just want to get there like really fast, but maybe we'll just hold it right there. And just know that the physical world around us is influenced by mind. there's a cosmic mind and there's also the personal factor, each one of us, because we have a will of our own. And there are some laws in place to, well, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but there are laws that are in place for us as personal beings having a personal factor in our own world. I feel like I'm leaving off too soon, but we're at the time. But I'm excited. We'll get into these in the coming episodes. Anything you want to say in closing out?
No, I just think this is really exciting, and I love the feeling of I guess knowing what's coming and like not being. It's hard to hold back. I think it's a fun feeling, just because to me it represents that once I know something, I know there's more to come. So anyway, that's a fun place to end off.
Okay, we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.